Here's a video that I didn't want to make. Actually, that's kind of inaccurate. It's a video that I didn't want to have to make. This may be old news by now, so you've probably heard that Nickelodeon has announced that they will be making the first ever spin-off of SpongeBob SquarePants. We don't have much information at current, but we do have a few things. It's going to be in CGI, it's apparently a prequel series and a spin-off to the third movie, It's a Wonderful Sponge. The plot is going to be about a 10-year-old SpongeBob at a summer camp. It was also announced less than a year after Steven Hillenburg's death. This is not going to be a pleasant video, but let's start off slow. We'll put aside all of the context around Kamp Koral, and we'll just talk about the potential of the show itself. Now, this show is not out as of yet, and these are just going to be my predictions and speculative thoughts. I could be dead wrong, but I'm fairly certain in what I'm speaking about, and I do not have hope for this spin-off. I think that it's going to crash and burn, if not be absolutely awful. I don't think there's going to be something exceptionally awful, like, say, the Powerpuff Girls reboot or Planet Sheen. However, Kamp Koral, from how it's described, has a very significant problem that nobody seems to be addressing. From what has been described to us, this is destined to be one of the most pointless spin-offs in existence. It actually showcases the difficulties in making a SpongeBob spin-off in general. Let's pick this apart one piece at a time. First of all, this is going to take place when SpongeBob was a 10-year-old kid. Why? You guys do know what kind of character that SpongeBob SquarePants is, right? Let's really think about this. SpongeBob is often called essentially a child in an adult's body. The entire first movie was about SpongeBob's quest to not be seen as just a kid. Or did the song "Now That We're Men" not beat that message into your brain? We've had several episodes, both new and old, that have had SpongeBob try to be perceived as more responsible and older, most notably Grandma's Kisses. He even goes to school in several episodes. In many of those episodes, Mrs. Puff's boarding school is portrayed like a full-fledged high school. From what I could tell, this was actually a compromise on Steven Hillenburg's part. Nickelodeon wanted a show with school-age SpongeBob, but he did not, because, as he put it, it would just be Hey Arnold underwater. So, SpongeBob going to boarding school was sort of their agreement, their compromise on this. Take a look at SpongeBob's life overall. He's trying to get his driver's license. He works in a fast food restaurant, and he tries to be accepted among his peers. This is a 16-year-old's life. Granted, 16 is still a different world than 10, but it's a good showcase of the problem. SpongeBob is a very versatile character. Too versatile for something like this. Depending on the situation, he can be seen as a child or an adult, and I think that's one of the reasons for his overall popularity. Anyone can relate to him. By making him a child, what do you add? Well, you make it so it's a lot less likely for him to get in more adult situations. You also limit a lot of his freedoms. Yeah, as an adult, SpongeBob can generally go and do whatever he wants. Kids, however, gotta deal with authority figures constantly telling them what to do, and telling them no. This is why so much kids' media just tries to get the parents out of the way as soon as possible. There are a lot of SpongeBob plots that could not be told if he was a kid, like the episode Sold, for instance, just as an example. But when your main character hangs around at Weenie Hut Jr., you can't tell me that there are plots that can't be tapped with his current age. There are other problems with this Kamp Koral as advertised. Most notably is that I've actually already seen Kamp Koral. I'm not being sarcastic either. I have actually seen quite a few episodes. There was that episode, The Inmates of Summer, where SpongeBob and Patrick think that a prison island is a summer camp. Then there was the camping episode. That episode was so good that a spin-off full of episodes just like that should be amazing, right? Club SpongeBob was about him surviving in the woods, as was Survival of the Idiots, and SpongeBob Family Vacation. Oh wait, those were SpongeBob episodes. I guess we have so many camping and wilderness episodes that just adding a whole series of them probably wouldn't hurt. I'm sorry if I got confused, it's just that I've seen Camp Lazlo before. SpongeBob is kind of like Looney Tunes or Tom and Jerry. An episode of Looney Tunes can take place in any time or place, period. If Daffy Duck is in the future, you don't question it. Sometimes Tom can be a common house cat, and sometimes he can be a concert pianist. Yes, both of those shows have had spin-offs, but they generally didn't run when the original shows were airing. They came out years later when the audience had changed. SpongeBob episodes can take place in the past, the future, the Old West, someone's dreams, in the summer, the winter, or inside Karen. A summer camp show can only take place in the summer at summer camp. Like making SpongeBob a child, you don't add more potential, you sand off potential that was already there. Phineas and Ferb can make it snow in summer. I highly doubt that SpongeBob could. And even if he could, I highly doubt that it would be worth the payoff when I could just watch Snowball Effect. And not to mention, the biggest problem with all of this is that SpongeBob is still airing. Airing a SpongeBob spin-off side by side with SpongeBob is one of the most pointless things imaginable. Then there's the CGI aspect. One of the reasons that people complain about CGI animation is because compared to 2D animation, it has very limited potential, especially in this situation. Let's take a look at another Nickelodeon property to see just what I mean. The Jimmy Neutron Power Hour. In that series of movies, Jimmy Neutron became 2D and Timmy Turner became 3D. The Jimmy Neutron characters look fine becoming 2D, because you don't generally have a problem when you make a 3D object 2D. That's generally what you do in animation to begin with. However, the Fairly OddParents characters look like mutant abominations because they were too stylized.
I'm loopy.
Seriously, what the fuck is that thing? Kill it with fire.
Not everything that looks good in 2D looks good in 3D. This is just a fact. It will always be a fact. In 2D animation, you can sort of fudge reality to get a specific effect. For example, some characters you'll always see at a 3/4 angle, because looking at a dead-on perspective would be just weird. And that's not something you can really do in 3D, where the camera can see everything about this character. 2D is much better for stylization. Not to say that 3D doesn't have its benefits, it definitely does over 2D. It can showcase changing styles a lot better than 3D. Wreck-It Ralph, for instance, was one of the first movies that I thought that actually needed to be 3D animated, because the different video game worlds wouldn't look as different as they did in 3D. However, the benefits of 2D are far more useful when it comes to a show like SpongeBob. SpongeBob, especially lately, is known for exaggerated cartoony expressions. You can do this with 3D. It'll end up looking either horrifying or cheap, though. The 3D animation we saw in Sponge Out of Water was pretty good, but if you think that's going to be the quality that they'll bring to a weekly television series, then you're out of your gourd. Think of 3D animation like realism. Realism can be a very useful tool, and it can be technically impressive. But making a show like, I don't know, Looney Tunes more realistic probably would detract from the point. A lot of the animation that we've seen in SpongeBob, especially lately, would be very expensive to animate in 3D, without breaking the model rigs completely. In 2D animation, no matter what the expression is, generally it costs the same. And making the show CGI is obviously an attempt to save as much money as possible. CGI shows tend to be more expensive from the start, but then you can end up reusing the models again and again and again, in ways that you can't really reuse the drawings. So, just about everything we know about this show leads me to like it less and have less hope for it. But now we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Kamp Koral was announced less than a year after Steven Hillenburg, the creator of SpongeBob SquarePants, had died. Upon this announcement, Paul Tippett, essentially the second-in-command on SpongeBob, tweeted this: "There is no way to prove this, but it looked very much like Nickelodeon had waited just for Steven Hillenburg to die to begin announcing spin-offs and cash in on his creation." Pie Guy Rules goes deeper into this aspect, and he says it a lot better than I possibly could. I'll leave a link to his video in the description. I do want to talk about this, but I want to use it as a jumping off point for a wider discussion that we need to have, especially for an audience like mine who is interested in animation and maybe interested in pursuing a career in animation. To put it simply, the animation industry is fucked. For those of you who think that I might be mispronouncing something, let me spell it out for you. The animation industry is F-U-C-K-E-D, with a capital F-U. Right now, the animation industry is probably the worst creative industry to work in. Yes, even worse than the games industry. Full disclosure, I've been working on my own animated series for about 5 years now, and at one point that I did state that I wanted to get it on networks at some point. I no longer want to do that, but it's not because of rejection or anything. It's because of my growing realization of the systematic problems with the animation industry as a whole. It has so many huge problems that I don't know where to begin. Actually, let's start with this: how creatives get abused. Generally speaking, and with very rare exceptions, to get your creative work onto a Cartoon Network like Nickelodeon or Disney, or the Cartoon Network, you need to give up your copyright to it. You see here, this is a product based on Gravity Falls, a choose-your-own-adventure book. For Alex Hirsch, the person who created Gravity Falls to make this, he needed to get specific permission from Disney to create anything based on his own work. It's entirely up to Disney what happens to the Gravity Falls property from here on out, and Alex Hirsch gets absolutely no say in the matter. Technically speaking, if Alex Hirsch were to sketch out an image of Dipper and Mabel without Disney's permission, he could be sued for copyright infringement. This is how Cartoon Network can give the Powerpuff Girls and Teen Titans to whoever they'd like. Usually this is a trade-off for getting the funds to have a pilot made in the first place. They end up scooping up the copyrights for these projects because they don't want to end up funding a pilot and having another network poach it. Constant Pain, I believe, belongs to Nickelodeon and not Mika Wright, the person who made it. It was a pilot that never became a full thing, largely only because of one scene that very remotely resembled the 9/11 terror attacks, and it hadn't been aired since. Copyright control in the animation industry is used as a bludgeon. And I think this is something that, like, everybody knows. It seems to be a very open secret. And for some reason, it seems like very few people outside the industry has a problem with this, even though it is a very, very big problem. It's been used to abuse creators since at least the 90s. If you don't do what the network wants, they will kick you off your own show and give it to somebody else. Or even if you do end up doing what they say, when you get too much respect and reputation to really kick around, like Craig McCracken, they'll end up giving your property to other people who are much easier to control, and do exactly what the network wants. One of the biggest examples of this is with the cartoon Making Fiends.
Once there was a little girl, a girl who could make fiends. She kept the whole town terrified, the girl who could make fiends. Then there came another girl who wanted to be friends, and Etta cannot stand her, so she plots her end.
When the creator, Amy Winfrey, signed over the rights to Nickelodeon, the show was stuck in development hell for years. One 6-episode season was made, and it wasn't even put on the main channel. It was put on Nicktoons. Despite being poorly advertised, it was the most successful show on that network. However, parents complained about its disturbing content and stopped airing the episodes. This was years after Invader Zim, by the way. Nickelodeon stopped airing it, but they kept the rights, so Amy Winfrey could never make any episodes of her show ever again. Let me put it like this. One succinct example that I can give to show how much of a problem this is. Viacom has the copyright to SpongeBob's voice. Tom Kenny, the voice actor of SpongeBob, cannot do his SpongeBob voice without Viacom's permission.
Jimbo! Got a restaurant full of hungry customers out there. Where are their burgers?
Oh, Mr. Slabs, you know I can't cook a slabby patty until it's cooked just right.
The movie Sausage Party was riddled with controversy. Even though it was the first CG animated film to be rated R, most of the controversy actually wasn't from its content, it was how its animators were treated. They were demanded to work overtime for free, they were threatened with termination for not hitting deadlines, and towards the end apparently half of the animation team was not credited. I even refused to touch the film because of these allegations. They eventually did get some kind of compensation, but what happened to the Sausage Party team was actually the standard treatment that many animation productions have. A lot of these animators find themselves being forced to work under these productions because if they don't work for a minuscule amount of money, the company will outsource the production to South Korea. Yeah, you ever wonder why so many American cartoons are animated in South Korea? The bottom 10% of American animators get paid about $38,000 a year. The median animator in South Korea gets the equivalent of $21,600 USD per year. That's a cost reduction of about 40% per person in a production that may have hundreds or thousands of people. The threat of outsourcing is a major problem in the American and Canadian animation industries. There's a big culture of, if you don't do your job for the price we tell you, we will find someone to replace you. And at current, it seems like there are many more animators wanting to get into the industry than are needed. And then there are the more dark problems. From what it seems, you're either a creative that everyone will turn a blind eye to when you do something bad, as we've seen with the recently surfacing allegations against John Kay and John Lasseter, or you're someone who will be blacklisted for saying the slightest thing wrong about a certain person, product, or network. Unless you're a huge name like Matt Groening, it's hard to find a cartoonist complain about a network or their treatment by a network. C.H. Greenblatt once made a Tumblr post about his frustrations with Nickelodeon, because he had found out about the cancellation of his show through a tweet, and not even from the network themselves. This Tumblr post was later deleted. Maybe it was because he had second thoughts, but the speculation is that Nick forced him to delete it. I think what's really fucked up about all of this, besides, everything, is that these are cartoons. These are usually the first pieces of media that we're exposed to in our lives. Most of these are aimed at kids. They can be seen as the epitome of innocence. And in a way, they're supposed to be auras of happiness. But no, a lot of what goes on behind the scenes is shrouded in darkness. Remember, this is only the stuff that we know, and all of these networks are very secretive about their practices. We don't know what happens at the inner workings of Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network, and the only thing the fans of animation tend to see are things like broken scheduling or the over-milking of a franchise. This is really the least of problems here. The animation industry is beyond corrupt. Most of the money that's made off an animated series comes from merchandising. This is because the creators usually don't get any royalties for this. The only one that benefits from merchandising is the network. Let's drive us back on track. I want to be clear. What Nickelodeon is doing with SpongeBob here and now legitimately does offend me. I find what they're doing abhorrent and disgusting. This is a show that I am not going to support in any way whatsoever. Good, bad, or in the middle. I am not going to review it. I do not care. This show does not deserve my viewership, and it doesn't deserve yours either. It may be a coincidence. From what I could tell, Nickelodeon could have made a SpongeBob spinoff at any time they wanted to. This wasn't even the first time that they toyed with the idea. At one point in history, a SpongeBob adult party cartoon was actually a very real possibility. Maybe it's just the mother of bad timing. I don't know, but it doesn't matter either way. For all anyone knows, Nickelodeon could have just waited until Steven Hillenburg died to go against his wishes and milk SpongeBob for a spinoff. The reason why it doesn't matter is because even if they did that, it would not be the most immoral thing that they've ever done. I want to say that there's a bright light at the end of the tunnel here, but There isn't. Viacom, Time Warner, Disney, they're some of the biggest companies on the planet. Waiting for them to fail, no matter how many bad choices they make, probably isn't going to happen. The problem is with the nature of animation specifically as a medium. Making good quality animation, like the kind that you see on television, is legitimately expensive. When it comes to making something that's live action, like a live action movie, you can make a lot of very good, very popular things for relatively cheap. For example, the Blair Witch Project only cost $60,000 to make. Compare that to the world of animation. It can take hundreds of thousands of dollars to get one episode done. Ren and Stimpy's 11-minute pilot cost $300,000, and that was back in the early 90s. It's nearly impossible for an independent to compete with that kind of thing without taking a decade. Even the best and most well-liked cartoonists of our time, Gennady Tarkovsky, Craig McCracken, Lauren Faust. There are stories of them being repeatedly abused by the networks. And even then, they can't just go and create their own cartoon without network control, like a live-action director could, because that kind of stuff takes millions, because animation is just that expensive. And we don't yet have animation's Unity, a program that lowers the barrier to entry for newcomers into the medium. Things like Toon Boom, the industry standard, you still need a license to use it. These days, more often than not, I feel like I just want to burn it all down. This is an industry where if we didn't have creatives being abused by the networks and the industry as a whole, we probably wouldn't have creatives at all. And that's just a little bit fucked up.